April 1945. The skies over eastern Germany were painted the grey of ash and gunpowder. The thousand-year Reich, Third Reich, was in its death throes. On the Eastern Front, Hitler's elite warriors, the Waffen-SS, faced a brutal reality. Death was not their greatest fear. Their true terror had a name: the Red Army. Throughout the war, SS soldiers were indoctrinated with ideas of supremacy and the glory of dying on the battlefield. But as the siege of Berlin tightened, the instinct for survival overrode ideology. A wave of panic, unprecedented in scale, spread through renowned SS divisions like Totenkopf, Death's Head, and Das Reich. They knew better than anyone what they had inflicted upon Russian soil, and they understood the Red Army's unwritten rule. Priority was given to capturing SS soldiers alive, not for prisoner exchange, but for summary execution or a slow death in the gulags of Siberia. To survive, those who once took pride in their black uniforms and the double lightning bolt insignia, Sig Runas, began a painful transformation. Thousands of Waffen-SS soldiers abandoned their armored vehicles, burning identity papers and service records. Yet there was one thing not easily discarded: the blood group tattoo characteristic of the SS located under the left armpit, once a mark of the elite, now a death warrant. Historical reports record gruesome scenes, soldiers using daggers, shards of glass, or even sharp rocks to gouge the flesh under their armpits to remove the tattoos. Many died of sepsis or blood loss before they could even flee. Those luckier sought to blend into the massive stream of refugees pouring west. A common tactic was adopted. SS battalions stripped off their uniforms, stealing clothes from farmers or corpses of regular soldiers, Wehrmacht. They merged into horse-drawn convoys of civilians, posing as husbands and fathers fleeing the chaos. Some units were even bold enough to don the uniforms of the order police or firefighters, hoping that in the confusion, the Allies would not distinguish between the uniforms. Their sole objective was the western border, controlled by American and British forces. In their minds, surrendering to the Americans was the only chance to preserve their lives. The result of this chaotic flight was a massive void in historical data. Approximately 1 million SS members evaporated from initial records. They vanished into forests, into villages, and into the flow of post-war society, carrying with them the darkest secrets of the 20th century. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, the Allies, US, UK, France, USSR, faced a legal and logistical challenge unprecedented in human history: how to prosecute a criminal organization with millions of members. The Nuremberg trials declared the SS a criminal organization, but enforcing justice was a different story. Allied investigators were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work. They held 10 million German POWs, including approximately 1 million suspected of being associated with the SS. However, identifying who was who proved nearly impossible. First, the filing system had been obliterated. In the final week of April 1945, on Himmler's orders, SS headquarters incinerated tons of classified documents, personnel lists, and execution records. Physical evidence turned to ash. Second, deep disagreements between the victorious powers paralyzed the purging process. The Soviets wanted brutal punishment and forced labor. The Americans and British, while desiring justice, began to worry about the burden of feeding millions of prisoners and the need to rebuild Europe. The denazification screening process quickly turned into a bureaucratic assembly line. Hundreds of thousands of low-ranking SS soldiers, men who had directly participated in massacres, needed only to claim they were cooks, drivers, or scouts to be classified as not guilty or Mitläufer, passive followers, after a cursory interrogation of just a few minutes. More dangerously, high-ranking Waffen-SS officers, once captured, quickly coordinated a perfect defensive script. They testified, "The Waffen-SS were just soldiers fighting on the front lines like the regular army. We had no connection to the concentration camps or the camp guards, Totenkopfverbände. This lie, repeated systematically, planted the seeds for the clean waffen-SS myth. The result was bitter. Only about 1–2% of waffen-SS members were ever actually prosecuted. Justice, instead of being a steel trap, became a sieve with gaping holes, allowing schools of sharks to return to the ocean. In 1947, the geopolitical landscape flipped 180 degrees. The Iron Curtain descended. For Washington and London, enemy number one was no longer the dead ideology of Nazism, but the spreading red wave of the Soviet Union. In this context, Western intelligence agencies suddenly realized an ironic paradox. The world's best experts on fighting the Soviets, those who intimately understood Red Army tactics, Eastern European terrain, and the Russian psyche, were the very former Waffen-SS officers they were imprisoning. Realpolitik triumphed over morality. The US began a campaign of recycling talent. The US Army Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, and later the CIA secretly recruited former SS officers to build spy networks behind the Iron Curtain. Foreign SS units, like the Vlasov or Kaminsky brigades, or veterans from the Viking and Nordland divisions, were retained, provided with new identities and salaries to serve as military advisors. The influence of ex-SS members extended beyond intelligence to the rearmament of West Germany. When the formation of the West German Army, Bundeswehr, was put on the table, Allied generals were forced to admit they needed the experience of the old officers. No one could build a new German army more effectively than those who had commanded the old one. A turning point occurred in 1951. Konrad Adenauer, West Germany's first chancellor, under pressure from veteran groups and the need for votes, personally met with the US High Commissioner to demand amnesty for SS war criminals. He argued that West Germany could not rebuild and join the Western Defense Bloc if thousands of its soldiers were still treated as criminals. The US agreed. Over 700 SS war criminals were released. The prison doors swung wide open, marking the beginning of the era of mass acquittal. Men who had slaughtered Jews and POWs now stepped out into the light, not as criminals, but as necessary citizens for the fight against communism. The period of 1950–1960 in West Germany is often called the economic miracle, Wirtschaftswunder. But beneath that glossy surface lay a dark truth: the comprehensive reintegration of Nazis into the democratic state apparatus. Not only were they free, but former Waffen-SS officers also returned to power. They became police chiefs, judges, prosecutors, parliamentarians, and mayors. They joined the government without hiding their past. In fact, that past was often viewed as proof of leadership and organizational capability. A shocking internal statistic from 1957 revealed the terrifying extent of this infiltration. Approximately 77% of senior officers in the West German criminal police had served in the Nazi Party or Hitler's security apparatus. An estimated one-third had direct ties to the SS or Gestapo. The legal consequences were disastrous. Prosecuting war crimes became virtually impossible in West Germany for 2 decades. How could an ex-SS judge convict an ex-SS defendant? War crimes trials during this period often turned into clumsy farces. Prosecutors deliberately overlooked evidence, witnesses were intimidated, and sentences were often light as a mere apology. 5 years probation, 3 years for illegal conduct, or, most commonly, acquitted due to lack of evidence. Protected by a lax legal system, the ex-Waffen-SS community began to reorganize. They formed CHIAG, Mutual Aid Association of former Waffen-SS members. Initially operating under the guise of finding missing comrades, CHIAG quickly became a powerful lobbying organization. They published magazines and memoirs, organized raucous reunions, and held public parades. They lobbied the government to pay pensions to SS soldiers equivalent to regular soldiers, and they succeeded. West German society, eager to forget the painful past, chose to turn a blind eye, inadvertently condoning the rise of old ghosts. Typically, history is written by the victors, but in the case of the Waffen-SS, they turned the tables thanks to a brilliant and sustained PR campaign lasting decades. Chiag and surviving SS generals realized they could not deny the existence of the Holocaust, so they chose a strategy of separation. They created a myth that the SS was divided into two types. One was the Allgemeine SS, political SS, responsible for concentration camps, the bad guys. The other was the Waffen-SS, armed SS, pure soldiers fighting for the fatherland, highly disciplined and uninvolved in crimes. Historical reality proves this was a blatant lie. Waffen-SS soldiers frequently rotated duties with camp guards, and Waffen-SS divisions themselves committed thousands of massacres against civilians in Russia, Poland, and France. But their propaganda message was incredibly appealing to Western audiences during the Cold War. Millions of Deutschmarks were spent funding friendly writers, filmmakers, and historians. Memoirs by SS generals like Paul Hauser or Kurt Meyer became bestsellers. In these pages, SS soldiers appeared as modern knights, brave, loyal, sacrificing themselves against the communist threat to defend the West. This image gradually permeated pop culture. From the 1970s onwards, in cheap pulp fiction, Hollywood movies, and later tactical board games, the image of the SS soldier began to shift. From bloodthirsty butchers, they transformed into worthy adversaries, warriors who were cool, dressed in sharp uniforms and fought professionally. This was the foundation for the strange fetishization we see today. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall in the early 90s did not end the story of the SS. Instead, it opened a more chaotic chapter. In the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Ukraine, liberation from the USSR led to a resurgence of extreme nationalism. Here, local Waffen-SS units, such as the Galicia Division or Latvian Legion, were hailed by some as patriots fighting Russia. Public parades commemorating SS soldiers caused international shockwaves and sparked fierce, unresolved diplomatic disputes. However, the greatest danger in the 21st century lies not in parades, but in cyberspace. The internet has become the perfect incubator for the revival of neo-Nazism and the Waffen-SS myth. On forums like 4chan, Reddit, or closed Facebook groups, the image of the Waffen-SS has been memified. It is completely detached from the context of genocide and crime. Instead, young people access the SS through the lens of aesthetics. Hugo Boss, black uniforms, skull symbols, uniformity, and discipline are viewed as cool, elite, and edgy. Gaming culture. In strategy games, Hearts of Iron, or shooters, Call of Duty, Enlisted, SS soldiers are often the strongest, most elite units. Players, wittingly or unwittingly, begin to enjoy controlling this faction. Modern Germany has reacted aggressively. The German Penal Code, StGB 86A, absolutely bans all symbols, salutes, and songs related to the SS. Owning or displaying SS runes can lead to prison time. But national laws cannot control the borders of the internet. In some dark corner of the virtual world, the clean Waffen-SS myth is still being nurtured, injected into the minds of a generation that has never known the smell of gunpowder. 80 years have passed since the bloody spring of 1945. The last Waffen-SS soldiers, living witnesses to a mad era, have mostly returned to dust. Militarily, they lost the war in 1945, but in terms of memory, can we say they have completely failed? We, the free world, failed when we released them too early for short-term political gain. We failed when we allowed them to return to power, to hold the pen and rewrite their own history. And most dangerously, we are failing to educate the younger generation, allowing the false myths created by Hayek half a century ago, to continue spreading like an ideological virus. The post-war story of the Waffen-SS is not just a history lesson, it is a stark warning for the present. Evil never simply vanishes when defeated on the battlefield. It merely sheds its old uniform, changes its language, dons the cloak of political necessity or pop culture, and waits patiently. It waits for us to forget. It waits for us to look away. The war against oblivion and the distortion of history is a never-ending battle. And in this war, our only weapon is the naked, uncompromising truth.